A librarian finds a book in the stacks that isn't in the catalog. It's bound in something that feels too much like skin. When she tries to shelve it, it bites her. By morning, the wound is gone, but a mark is burned in its place. A dark, swirling brand that hasn't been seen in 3 centuries. A mark that means she is either the key to breaking an ancient pact or the sacrifice that will renew it. What she didn't know was that the bite wasn't an accident. It was a summons, and the king who just answered it is already on his way. The book arrived on a Tuesday. Later, Eleanor would think about that. How ordinary the day had been. How the autumn sun slanted through the tall windows of the Astoria archives, exactly as it always did, turning dust motes into lazy constellations. She'd been humming something half-remembered, her fingers tracing the spines of returns as she rolled her cart down the narrow aisles. The archive smelled like it always did. Old paper and lemon wood polish, coffee from the break room, the faint mustiness that no amount of climate control could quite eliminate. The book sat in the returns bin like it belonged there. She almost didn't notice it, almost wheeled right past, her mind already on the manuscript authentication waiting on her desk. But something made her stop, made her look twice at the leather-bound volume resting atop a stack of mundane historical texts. It was beautiful. That was her first thought. Dark leather the color of dried blood, embossed with symbols she didn't recognize. Geometric patterns that seemed to shift when she wasn't looking directly at them. No title on the spine, no call number sticker. The leather was buttery soft, obviously old, but in remarkable condition. Eleanor frowned. She'd worked at the archives for 6 years. She knew every rare book in their collection, and this wasn't one of them. More importantly, rare books didn't go in the public returns bin. They came through her desk, through controlled channels, with paperwork and provenance. She reached for it carefully, the way she'd been trained, supporting the spine, not forcing it open. The leather was warm under her fingers, impossibly warm, like something living. The book opened easily, as though eager. The pages were vellum, she thought. Real vellum, not the modern imitation. The text was handwritten in a language she couldn't identify, illuminated with gold leaf and pigments that seemed too vibrant, too fresh. The illustrations made her breath catch, intricate diagrams of celestial bodies, anatomical drawings of creatures that couldn't exist, symbols that hurt to look at too long. It was extraordinary. It was priceless. It absolutely did not belong in a returns bin. Eleanor was still staring at an illustration of something with too many wings when the page moved. Not turned. Moved. Rippled like water disturbed by a stone. The symbols began rearranging themselves, flowing across the vellum like living things. She should have dropped it, should have stepped back. Instead, she watched in frozen fascination as the text reformed into words she could read. Found, the book wrote itself in elegant script. Claimed. The pain was instant and absolute. It felt like teeth, dozens of them, needle-sharp, sinking into her right palm where it pressed against the page. Eleanor screamed, jerking backward, but the book held fast, stuck to her hand like something with suction. The symbols were glowing now, burning gold, and she could feel them burrowing under her skin, spreading like poison through her veins. The cart overturned as she fell. Books scattered across the floor in a cascade of sound that brought running footsteps, concerned voices. Someone was shouting her name. Someone else was trying to pull the book away, but it wouldn't budge, wouldn't release her, not until the symbols had finished writing themselves into her flesh. When it finally let go, Eleanor collapsed onto the cold tile floor, cradling her hand against her chest. The book lay beside her, closed now, innocent as anything. Her palm throbbed with a fierce, hot pain. She looked down. The mark was beautiful in a terrible way, a complex geometric pattern that started in the center of her palm and spiraled outward, black as ink against her pale skin. It looked like a tattoo, but she could feel it deeper than that, in the bone, in the blood. It pulsed with her heartbeat. "Call an ambulance," someone was saying. "Eleanor, can you hear me? What happened?" She opened her mouth to answer, but the words wouldn't come. The mark burned brighter, and suddenly she knew with a certainty that bypassed rational thought, that something had changed. Something fundamental. The air tasted different. The light looked wrong. And beneath the sound of worried voices, she could hear something else. A whisper. A word. King. The hospital couldn't explain the mark. They took x-rays, blood samples, tried dermabrasion that didn't even scratch the surface. The pattern remained perfect, untouched, mocking their instruments. The doctors spoke in careful, professional tones about hysteria and psychosomatic symptoms and potential exposure to industrial chemicals. One suggested a psychiatric evaluation. Eleanor let them talk. She sat in the sterile examination room with her hand wrapped in gauze that wouldn't hide anything and listened to the mark whisper its impossible knowledge. She knew things now. Things she shouldn't. She knew the book was called The Grimoire of Binding. She knew it was 412 years old. She knew it had been hidden, locked away, kept from the world, because anyone who touched it became marked as something called a key-bearer. And she knew that key-bearers didn't live long. The last one had died 300 years ago, burned alive in a purification ritual that was supposed to break the pact. It hadn't worked. The pact endured. And now the grimoire had found someone new. "Ms. Hartley?" The doctor's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. "We'd like to keep you overnight for observation." "No." Eleanor's voice came out rougher than she'd intended. She cleared her throat, tried again. "No, thank you. I need to go home. I really don't think... I'm leaving." She stood up, pulling her hand close. The mark was getting warmer. Time was running out. She could feel it counting down to something, though she didn't know what. They couldn't stop her. She was a voluntary patient. She signed the forms against medical advice, ignored the concerned looks from the nurses, and walked out into the October twilight with nothing but her phone, her keys, and a mark that meant her life as she knew it was over. Her apartment felt wrong when she got there. Everything was exactly as she'd left it that morning. Books stacked on the coffee table, tea mug in the sink, her favorite blanket folded over the arm of the couch. But it all seemed distant now, like she was looking at someone else's life through glass. The mark throbbed against her palm, insistent, urgent. Eleanor paced. 3 steps to the window, turn, 5 steps to the kitchenette, turn again. Her mind raced through possibilities, through plans. She should research, find information about the grimoire, about key-bearers, about whatever pact she'd apparently become part of. She should call someone. The police? No. They'd think she was insane. Her sister? And say what exactly? The knock on her door made her jump. She wasn't expecting anyone. It was past 9, too late for deliveries or neighbors. Eleanor moved to the door slowly, peering through the peephole. A man stood in the hallway. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark coat that looked expensive even through the distorted view of the peephole. His face was striking. Sharp cheekbones, strong jaw, dark hair that fell slightly into his eyes. But it was his expression that made her hesitate. He looked grim, determined. And somehow, impossibly, he was looking directly at the peephole like he could see her through it. "Eleanor Hartley." His voice was deep, carrying clearly through the door. It wasn't a question. "You need to let me in. You're in danger." "Who are you?" She kept her voice steady despite the fear climbing up her throat. "My name is Kaylin Thorne." A pause. "You touched the grimoire of binding. I'm here because you survived it, which means you're either remarkably lucky or remarkably powerful. Either way, they're already coming for you." The mark flared hot against her palm. Eleanor gasped, pressing it against her stomach. The pain was exquisite, blinding. And somehow she knew with that same impossible certainty, that he was telling the truth. "How do I know you're not one of them?" she managed through gritted teeth. You don't. He sounded almost amused. But you're running out of time to decide. The mark is getting warmer, isn't it? That means they've found you. In approximately 3 minutes, something very old and very angry is going to come through your window. You can let me in and possibly survive, or you can wait and definitely die. Your choice. Eleanor's hand was on the deadbolt before she'd consciously decided to move. The man, Kalen, stepped inside with the fluid grace of something predatory. Up close, he was even more striking. His eyes were an unusual color, somewhere between gray and silver, and they seemed to catch the light like an animal's. He was scanning her apartment with the efficiency of someone trained for threat assessment. Windows, he said curtly. Do they open? The bedroom. Show me. She led him through her tiny apartment, hyper-aware of his presence behind her. He moved silently despite his size, and the air around him felt different. Cooler, heavier, charged with something she couldn't name. When they reached the bedroom, he went immediately to the window, examining the latch. Good. It's sealed. He turned to face her fully for the first time, and the weight of his attention was almost physical. Let me see your hand. Eleanor hesitated, then held out her right hand. He took it carefully, his fingers cool against her fevered skin, and unwrapped the gauze with surprising gentleness. When the mark was revealed, something flickered across his face. Surprise. Recognition. Something that might have been dismay. Hell, he breathed. It's complete. What does that mean? It means the grimoire didn't just mark you. It bonded with you. He traced the air above the pattern, not quite touching. Every keybearer before you took days to fully manifest. You did it in hours. That's unprecedented. The book said I was found, claimed. Eleanor's voice shook slightly. What does it want from me? Kalen's jaw tightened. Not what. Who? The grimoire is a contract written in blood and bound with ancient magic. It requires a keybearer to maintain the pact between our world and theirs. You're the lock that keeps something very dangerous from crossing over. Their world? The things that existed before humanity. The things your ancestors made deals with to survive. Then locked away when they became too powerful to control. He released her hand, stepped back. The pact has held for 4 centuries, but it's weakening. There are factions that want to break it entirely, let the old ones through. And there are factions that want to strengthen it, which requires... He trailed off, but Eleanor's new knowledge filled in the gap. A sacrifice. The keybearer's death fuels the pact. Yes. So people are coming to kill me. Yes. The confirmation should have terrified her. Instead, Eleanor felt something cold and clear settle over her panic. This was real. This was happening. She could fall apart, or she could survive. Why are you here? She asked. If I'm so valuable dead, why help me? Kalen was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. Because I'm tired of burning people alive to maintain someone else's bargain. Because the pact itself is a prison, and you might be the key to ending it properly. He met her eyes. And because 400 years ago, I promised I would protect the next keybearer if I ever got the chance. Eleanor stared at him. 400 years. 400 years ago, the last keybearer had died. 400 years ago, the pact had been sealed. You were there. When they killed her... Him, Kalen corrected softly. His name was Thomas. He was 17 years old and an apprentice baker. They burned him on the winter solstice because the pact was failing and they needed blood to seal it. He stopped, something like pain crossing his features. I was newly turned. Too weak to stop it. I've had 4 centuries to regret that. The window exploded inward. Glass showered across the room in a glittering cascade. Eleanor screamed, throwing her arms up instinctively, but Kalen was already moving, faster than anything human, pushing her behind him as something massive and dark poured through the broken window like smoke given form. It had too many limbs. Too many angles. Its body seemed to exist in more dimensions than 3, folding in on itself in ways that made Eleanor's eyes water. Where it touched her bedroom floor, frost spread in crystalline patterns. Fetchhound. Kaylin said calmly, like he was identifying a breed of dog. "They're tracking the mark." "Stay behind me!" The creature lunged. Kaylin caught it mid-leap. His hand closed around what might have been a throat, and Eleanor saw his fingers elongate slightly, nails darkening to claws. The fetch hound shrieked, a sound like grinding metal, and thrashed. Ice was forming on Kaylin's coat where it touched him, but he didn't seem to notice. "The old ways are forbidden," he said to the creature in a voice that resonated with command. "You know me. You know what I am. Leave, or I'll send you back in pieces." The fetch hound twisted, snapping jaws that dripped something luminescent onto Eleanor's carpet. It was trying to get around Kaylin, trying to reach her. The mark on her palm burned so hot she bit back a sob. Kaylin twisted sharply. There was a sound like breaking ice, and the creature dissolved into mist that smelled of ozone and rotting flowers. He held the position for a moment longer, then straightened, brushing frost from his coat. That was the first. He turned to look at her, and his eyes were entirely silver now, reflecting light like mirrors. "They'll send worse. We need to leave. Now." Eleanor looked at her destroyed bedroom window, at the frost patterns melting into her carpet, at the man with eyes like mercury who'd just killed something from a nightmare with his bare hands. "Where?" she asked, because what else was there to say? "Somewhere I can protect you properly." He pulled out his phone, typed something one-handed. "Somewhere they'll think twice before attacking." "Which is?" Kaylin looked at her, and for the first time, she saw something almost apologetic in his expression. "My home. The place I've been avoiding for the last 30 years. He pocketed the phone. "We're going to see the king. I thought you were—" "I'm his heir," Kaylin interrupted quietly. "The crown prince, though I gave up the title decades ago. But if I claim formal protection over you, invoke the old laws, even the factions that want you dead will have to proceed carefully. It might buy us enough time to find another way. And the king will allow this?" Something dark flickered across Kaylin's face. "He won't have a choice. I'll make it a matter of honor. Ancient customs are the only thing he respects anymore." He moved toward her door, pausing to look back. "Pack light. We leave in 5 minutes. Anything you can't live without, bring it now. Everything else is already gone." Eleanor looked around her apartment, her books, her carefully curated life, her normal existence that had ended the moment she touched a book that shouldn't exist. She thought about arguing, thought about running. The mark pulsed against her palm like a second heartbeat, and she knew neither option was real. She grabbed her messenger bag and started packing. They left through the parking garage, moving quickly through shadows that seemed to gather around Kaylin like living things. Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs, adrenaline making everything sharp and bright and surreal. Every sound made her flinch. Every shadow could be another creature like the one that had come through her window. Here. Kaylin stopped beside a black car that looked expensive and predatory. He opened the passenger door for her with old-fashioned courtesy that seemed strange coming from someone who'd just killed a monster. "Get in. Stay low." Eleanor slid into the leather seat, clutching her bag against her chest. The car was immaculate, smelled like cedar and something else. Something cold and clean that might have been Kaylin himself. He got in beside her, started the engine with a quiet purr, and pulled out of the garage smoothly. "Where is this place?" Eleanor asked as they merged onto the highway. The city lights were falling away behind them, replaced by the darkness of the countryside. "North. In the mountains." Kaylin's eyes never left the road, scanning constantly. "It's called Thornhaven. It's been in my family for a long time." "How long is a long time when you're 400 years old?" His mouth quirked slightly, might have been amusement. 800 years, give or take. "The foundations are older. The land itself is much older." He glanced at her briefly. "You're handling this well. I'm having a mental breakdown. I'm just doing it quietly." "Fair enough." They drove in silence for a while. Eleanor watched the darkness flow past, her mind still racing. The mark had cooled slightly since they left her apartment, but she could feel it there. A constant presence under her skin. Every few minutes, images would flash through her mind, symbols, phrases and languages she didn't know, glimpses of something vast and terrible pressing against a barrier she couldn't see. "What are they?" she asked finally. "The things on the other side of the pact. The old ones." Kaylin was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he did, his voice was careful, measured. They're what came before. When the world was younger, stranger. They weren't gods exactly, but they weren't animals either. They were power given form, hunger given consciousness. When humans started building cities, claiming land, imposing order on chaos, the old ones saw them as prey, as toys. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. The war lasted generations. Humans couldn't win, so they did what humans do. They negotiated. The pact sealed the old ones away, locked them in spaces between spaces, but the lock requires a key. And I'm the key. You're the key. Eleanor looked down at her marked palm. In the dim light from the dashboard, the symbols seemed to move slightly, rearranging themselves into new patterns. Why me? Why did the book choose me? No one knows how the grimoire chooses. The last key-bearer was an apprentice baker. Before him a soldier. Before her a seamstress. No pattern. He took an exit, heading deeper into the mountains. Some think it chooses people with latent magical ability. Others think it's random. I think it chooses people who are standing at crossroads in their lives. People who are ready for things to change, whether they know it or not. Eleanor thought about that, about how she'd been feeling lately. Restless, confined, like her careful life was a cage she'd built herself. That's terrifying. Yes, you said the pact is weakening. What happens if it breaks completely? The old ones come back. They reclaim what they consider theirs, which is everything. Kaylin's voice was flat, emotionless, but Eleanor heard the fear underneath. The last time they walked free, humanity nearly ended. I speak the words of claiming. Bind myself as your protector by blood and oath. In exchange, you accept my protection and agree to reside under my authority while the threat exists. He paused. It's an old ritual. Binding but not absolute. You maintain your autonomy. I'm simply declaring that any threat to you is a threat to me, and by extension, to the crown. Binding how? There will be a blood exchange. Small. Symbolic. It creates a link between us. I'll be able to sense if you're in danger, find you if you're lost. You'll be able to call me if you need help. That's all. Eleanor turned to face him. In the firelight, his features looked less harsh, more human, but his eyes still gleamed with that metallic sheen. You keep talking about duty and tradition and protection, but you could have left me in my apartment. Let them take me. Instead, you're risking conflict with your own father, disrupting decades of exile, all for a stranger. Why? Kaylin was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, almost vulnerable. Because I'm tired of watching people burn for someone else's peace. Because I've lived 400 years, and I'm still haunted by the memory of a 17-year-old boy screaming as the flames took him. Because when I saw your mark, saw how quickly it manifested, I thought maybe... He stopped, looked away. Maybe you're different. Maybe there's another way. And maybe I'm just selfish enough to want to find it before another innocent dies for a pact I never believed in. The honesty in his words made something loosen in Eleanor's chest. She'd been so focused on her own terror, her own confusion, she hadn't considered what this was costing him. The exile he was ending, the family he was confronting, the stand he was taking against forces she didn't fully understand. Thank you, she said quietly, for coming for me. For trying. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something passed between them. Recognition. Perhaps. Understanding. Two people standing against the weight of history, trying to write a different ending. Don't thank me yet, he said. The hard part comes next. A knock at the door interrupted them. A young man entered, pale and dark-haired, carrying a tray of food and a bundle of dark fabric. My lord, miss. I've brought dinner and appropriate clothing for the ceremony. Thank you, Marcus. Kaylin nodded to him. Is Theron ready? Yes, my lord. He's preparing the hall now. The king has been informed. He'll receive you in the throne room in 90 minutes. Perfect. That's just enough time for him to work himself into a rage. Kaylin's tone was dry. Excellent. Marcus bowed and left. Kaylin moved toward the door, then paused. Eat. Change. Someone will come to escort you. When you enter the throne room, stay close to me. Don't speak unless directly addressed. And whatever happens, whatever my father says, don't let him see fear. He respects strength. Everything else is weakness he'll exploit. Comforting. I'm not here to comfort you. I'm here to keep you alive. But his expression softened slightly. You'll be fine, Eleanor. You shelved books in an archive. You survived a fetch-hound attack. You're sitting in a castle full of predators and you haven't run screaming yet. You're stronger than you think. He left, closing the door quietly behind him. Eleanor looked at the food. Soup, bread, fruit that looked too perfect to be natural, and the dark clothing laid out on the bed. A dress, she realized, picking it up. Elegant, high-necked, long-sleeved, made of fabric that seemed to absorb light, the kind of thing someone wore to meet a king. She ate mechanically, tasting nothing, changed into the dress, which fit perfectly despite no one knowing her size. Looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back, pale, marked, dressed for a ceremony she didn't understand in a world she'd just learned existed. The mark on her palm pulsed steadily, warm against her skin. Eleanor took a breath, then another. She'd spent 6 years cataloging other people's histories, filing away centuries of human experience into neat, organized categories. She'd been careful, safe, small, that life was gone. The book had made sure of that, so she could collapse, or she could survive. Could hide or could fight. Could let ancient powers decide her fate, or could claim some agency in how this ended. When the knock came, she was ready. The throne room was built to impress and intimidate in equal measure. Eleanor walked between 2 silent guards, her footsteps echoing off stone floors polished to a mirror shine. The ceiling soared overhead, supported by columns carved to look like trees, their branches spreading across the vaulted space in a canopy of stone leaves. Hundreds of candles provided light, their flames casting dancing shadows. And at the far end of the massive space, raised on a dais of black stone, sat 2 thrones. One was empty, the other held the king. He was beautiful. They all were, but he was something else. Beauty refined by 6 centuries into something almost inhuman. Tall, even sitting down, with silver hair that fell past his shoulders, and eyes like chips of ice. He wore black, simple and elegant, but there was a circlet on his brow that caught the light like captured stars. Power radiated from him like heat, making the air itself feel thick. Kaelin stood at the base of the dais, changed into formal clothes. Black coat with silver embroidery, high collar, boots polished to a shine. Next to him was an older man holding a leather-bound book and a ceremonial blade. Theron, Eleanor guessed. The court was assembled. Dozens of them, maybe 100, lining the walls of the throne room in their finery. All watching, all waiting. Eleanor's guard stopped 10 paces from the dais and stepped aside. She was alone, exposed, every eye in the room fixed on her. The king spoke. His voice was like winter-made sound, cold, precise, cutting. My son returns after 30 years of exile, and he brings a human into our home. Explain yourself, Kaelin. I wasn't aware I was exiled, Father. Kaelin's voice was steady, neutral. I chose to leave, and now I choose to return, as is my right as your heir, with a key-bearer. The king's gaze fixed on Eleanor, and she felt the weight of it like a physical thing. Do you have any idea what you've done? I've claimed her under the old laws. She's marked, hunted, and in need of protection. I'm offering it, the same protection any member of this court could offer to someone in distress. She's not just anyone in distress. She's the lock that keeps the old ones contained. The factions will want her dead. You've brought war to our doorstep. The factions wanted war already. Kaelin's voice sharpened. They've been pushing for it for decades. This just forces everyone to choose sides openly. He turned to Eleanor, extended his hand. Come here. Eleanor moved forward on legs that felt like water. She took his hand. His skin was cool, his grip firm, and let him draw her up the steps to stand beside him. Eleanor Hartley, Kaelin said formally, projecting his voice to carry through the throne room. I, Kaelin Thorne, Crown Prince of Thornhaven, do hereby claim you as ward in charge. By blood and oath, I bind myself as your protector. Your enemies are my enemies. Your safety is my responsibility. I invoke the ancient law of sanctuary, the right of protection, the bond of the guardian. He took the ceremonial blade from Theron, drew it across his own palm without flinching. Dark blood welled up, nearly black. "Do you accept this claim?" The mark on Eleanor's palm burned hot. She knew what she was supposed to say, the words flowing into her mind like they'd always been there. "I accept. I acknowledge Calen Thorne as protector and guardian. I place myself under his authority in matters of safety. I accept the bond." She held out her marked hand. Calen pressed their palms together. The moment his blood touched the mark, power surged through her like lightning. Eleanor gasped, her knees buckling. He caught her with his other arm, held her steady as magic burned through her veins, forging connections she didn't understand. She could feel him suddenly, his presence in her mind like a second heartbeat, his absolute determination, his carefully controlled fear. The mark blazed with light, illuminating the throne room. The symbols rearranged themselves, incorporating new patterns, and Eleanor knew, suddenly and certainly, that she could find Calen anywhere now. Could call him and he would hear her, could draw on his strength if she needed it. The light faded. Eleanor swayed, and Calen's arm tightened around her waist, supporting her. The throne room was silent. The king rose from his throne. He moved down the steps slowly, deliberately, until he stood directly in front of them. Up close, Eleanor could see the age in his eyes, the weight of centuries, the accumulated sorrow and rage and cold calculation. He looked at her like she was an interesting problem. Then he looked at his son, and his expression hardened into something that might have been disappointment. "You've invoked the old laws," he said quietly. "Bound yourself to a human girl who will likely be dead within the month. For what? Sentiment? Rebellion? What do you hope to accomplish?" "Change," Calen said simply. "The pact is dying. We all know it. We can let it fail and face the old ones unprepared, or we can sacrifice another innocent and buy ourselves a century before we're right back here. Or," his voice strengthened, "we can find another way. The grimoire chose Eleanor for a reason. Maybe it's time we stopped treating keybearers as sacrificial lambs and started treating them as what they actually are. Which is the key to ending this properly." The king was silent for a long moment. Then unexpectedly he smiled. It was a terrible smile, full of ancient amusement and something cruel. "You always were idealistic? I thought 3 centuries would cure you of it. Apparently not." He turned to address the court. "My son has invoked the old laws. The claim is witnessed and bound. The human girl is under royal protection. Anyone who harms her answers to me." Relief rushed through Eleanor. It had worked. He was honoring the "however." The king's voice cut through her relief like a blade. "Protection is not a blank check. The law requires that she prove herself worthy of such protection, that she demonstrate value beyond simply being marked." He looked at Eleanor directly. "You have until the autumn equinox. 3 weeks. If, in that time, you can show me that you're more useful alive than dead, that there's genuine hope of finding an alternative to the sacrifice, I'll continue the protection. If not," he shrugged elegantly, "I'll hand you over to the factions myself. The needs of our people outweigh the life of one human. Father, that wasn't the agreement. That is my judgment." The king's voice cracked like a whip. "You invoked the old laws, Calen. All of them, including the clause that allows me to set terms for long-term protection. You're a prince. She's a burden. If you want to keep her, prove she's worth keeping." He turned away, dismissing them. "The court is adjourned." "Get her out of my sight." The throne room erupted into whispers. Eleanor felt the weight of them, the speculation and judgment and fear. The mark on her palm throbbed in time with her racing heart. 3 weeks. She had 3 weeks to prove her worth to a king who'd already decided she was disposable, or she'd burn just like Thomas had. Calen's hand found hers, squeezed once. "Come on," he said quietly. "We're done here." He led her through the crowd, which parted for them like water, back out into the corridor. Eleanor's legs were shaking. Her mind was racing. Behind them, she heard voices rising, arguments beginning, the court tearing itself apart over what Calen had done. "I'm sorry," Calen said once they were alone in the hallway. "I didn't think he'd invoke that clause. It's archaic, barely used anymore. What does it mean, prove myself worthy? It means we have 3 weeks to find a way to destroy the grimoire, or at least prove that it's possible. Something concrete enough that my father will see more value in pursuing it than in your death." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. Hell, this is worse than I thought. Eleanor looked down at her marked palm, at the new symbols that had appeared after the binding. Her life measured in days now, a deadline as literal as it got. Then we'd better get started. Kaelin looked at her, and something like admiration flickered across his face. You're taking this remarkably well. I'm having a mental breakdown. I'm just doing it quietly. She met his eyes. You said the grimoire is sustained by the pact itself. If that's true, it should be in here. She tapped her marked palm. The mark connects me to it, right? To the binding? Theoretically. Then maybe I can use that connection. Learn from it. Figure out how it works from the inside. The idea was forming as she spoke, pulled from the mark itself, from the knowledge bleeding through. The book bit me. Bonded with me. Maybe that was the first mistake the grimoire made in 400 years, getting too close to its key. Kaelin stared at her. That's actually not a terrible idea. Dangerous, but not terrible. Good, because it's the only idea I have. He studied her for another moment, then nodded slowly. All right, tomorrow we start researching. Theron has records going back centuries, and there are people, scholars, mages, who've studied the pact. We'll consult everyone we can. He paused. For what it's worth, I meant what I said. I will protect you. 3 weeks, 3 years, it doesn't matter. You're not burning while I'm alive to prevent it. The conviction in his voice made Eleanor's throat tight. Why? You barely know me. Because you deserve to live. Because the pact was a terrible solution to begin with. And perpetuating it with more death only makes us as monstrous as what we locked away. His voice dropped. And because when I looked at you tonight, marked and terrified but still standing, I saw Thomas. Saw what he could have become if someone had protected him. I won't fail again. Eleanor didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to respond to someone who carried 4 centuries of grief and was trying to write a different ending. So she did the only thing she could. She squeezed his hand, still linked with hers, and hoped he understood. They stood in the hallway, 2 people bound by blood and oath, with 3 weeks to change the world or die trying. The mark pulsed against her palm. The clock was ticking. Eleanor woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and a moment of complete disorientation. The 4-poster bed, the stone walls, the faint smell of old wood and beeswax. None of it made sense. Then memory returned in a rush, and with it, the dull throb of the mark on her palm. She sat up, examining it in the morning light. The symbols looked even more complex than they had last night, layered over each other in patterns that hurt to focus on too long. When she concentrated, she could feel the grimoire somewhere distant, like a second pulse. And beneath that, fainter but present, Kaelin's presence in her mind, steady, controlled, awake. A knock at the door made her jump. Miss Hartley? Iris's voice, polite and professional. I've brought breakfast. May I enter? Yes, come in. Iris entered with a tray, setting it on the small table by the window. She looked tired, Eleanor thought. Or worried. Maybe both. The prince asked me to tell you he'll meet you in the library at 9. Master Theron is gathering research materials. She hesitated. How are you feeling? Like I'm living in someone else's life. Eleanor moved to the table, looking at the food. Fresh bread, butter, jam, eggs, fruit. Real food, not the half-real provisions from last night. Is that normal? After a binding? I wouldn't know. I've never seen one performed before. Iris poured tea from a delicate pot. But the bond is strong, I can tell that much. The court is divided about it. Divided how? Some think the prince is mad, risking everything for a human. Some think he's brave, finally challenging the old ways. Some think you're a threat just by existing. Iris met her eyes. And some of us are hoping you're exactly what you appear to be. A chance to change things that have been wrong for far too long. Eleanor wrapped her hands around the warm teacup. Which are you? I've served the prince for 60 years. I was there when he left, when he couldn't bear to watch the court tear itself apart over the pact anymore. I've seen him exile himself rather than participate in something he found morally repugnant. Iris's voice was quiet but firm. If he thinks you're worth protecting, worth fighting for, then I believe him. I just hope it doesn't cost him everything. He said you were loyal. I am. But loyalty doesn't mean I can't worry. She moved toward the door, paused. Be careful in the library, miss. Knowledge is dangerous here, especially knowledge about the old ones. Don't read anything without Master Theron's approval. Some texts can harm you just by being opened. Noted. Iris left, and Eleanor ate mechanically, her mind already racing ahead to the library, to research, to whatever they might find. She needed to understand the grimoire, needed to figure out how the binding worked, where the weaknesses were, how something sustained by magic could be unmade. She dressed in clothes someone had left in the wardrobe, practical this time. Dark pants and a soft sweater that felt like cashmere. Everything fit perfectly. Magic, she assumed, or just the unsettling efficiency of people who'd had centuries to master hospitality. A different guard escorted her through the castle. Morning light transformed the stone corridors, making them seem less forbidding. She passed windows overlooking gardens that were impossibly beautiful, flowers blooming in colors that shouldn't exist, trees with silver bark, fountains that sparkled like captured starlight. Everything about this place felt slightly unreal, like reality had been enhanced somehow, made more vivid. The library was exactly what Eleanor had dreamed libraries could be. It filled an entire wing of the castle. 3 stories of books rising toward a domed ceiling painted with constellations. Spiral staircases connected the levels. Reading alcoves were tucked between shelves. The morning sun poured through stained glass windows, painting everything in jewel tones. The smell of old paper and leather and knowledge made something in Eleanor's chest ache with longing. Kaelin stood near a massive table covered in books and scrolls, talking quietly with an older man who had to be Theron. They both looked up when she entered. Miss Hartley. Theron bowed slightly. He had kind eyes, Eleanor noticed, and the patient expression of someone who'd spent centuries studying. Welcome. I've gathered what we have on the grimoire and the binding rituals. It's not as much as I'd like, but it's a start. Eleanor moved to the table, looking at the assembled materials. Ancient texts, some in languages she didn't recognize. Scrolls that looked like they'd disintegrate if handled wrong. A few newer books, research compilations from the last century. And in the center, carefully isolated on a silk cloth, a single page that made the mark on her palm burn hot. Is that from the grimoire? Kaelin confirmed. Or a copy of one page. It's the only fragment anyone's ever successfully removed, and even that required 3 mages and a ritual that nearly killed them. We've been studying it for 200 years. Eleanor reached toward it instinctively, then stopped herself. Should I try? Theron said. You're the key bearer. You might be able to perceive things we can't. She touched the page carefully. The response was immediate. The symbols began moving, rearranging themselves into readable text. Eleanor gasped as information poured into her mind, too fast to process consciously, but somehow she understood it anyway. It's a map, she breathed. Not of places, of connections. The grimoire is showing me how the pact is structured, nodes and links and anchor points. The old ones are on one side, humanity on the other, and the key-bearer is the lock that keeps them separated. But it's not just a lock, it's a conduit. Power flows through me, through the mark, feeding the barrier. Can you see weaknesses? Kaelin leaned closer, careful not to touch her while she was linked to the page. Eleanor concentrated, following the map in her mind. The connections were intricate, layered over centuries. But there were weak points. Places where the binding had frayed, where time and the unwilling nature of past sacrifices had created gaps. The pact is failing because it was never meant to last forever. Each key-bearer was supposed to willingly maintain it for a lifetime, then pass it on to the next. But when Thomas was killed instead of completing a natural transfer, it broke the pattern. The grimoire has been trying to compensate ever since, but it's like... She searched for the right metaphor. Like a machine missing a crucial part. It's still running, but it's damaging itself in the process. Theron was scribbling notes frantically. Can you see what the missing part is? Choice, agency. The key-bearer is supposed to be a partner in the binding, not a victim. The grimoire is designed to work with someone, not against them. Eleanor pulled her hand back, the connection breaking. She swayed slightly, and Kaelin steadied her with a hand on her elbow. When it chose me, when it bonded so quickly, maybe it was trying to find someone who could actually work with it. Someone who could help it complete its function properly instead of just serving as a temporary patch. That's... Theron looked amazed. That's more than we've learned in 2 centuries. Your connection to it is extraordinary. Or I'm just good at reading complicated systems. Eleanor managed a weak smile. 6 years cataloging archives teaches you pattern recognition. Kaelin was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. If the grimoire needs a willing partner, and you're willing to work with it, what happens? Could you redirect the pact? Change its parameters? Maybe. I don't know. Eleanor looked at the fragment again. But I think I could learn. If I could study the grimoire itself, spend time with it, let it teach me how the binding works. Absolutely not. Kaelin's voice was sharp. The grimoire is dangerous. It's already marked you. Going deeper could trap you completely, make you unable to break free even if we find a way. Or it could give us the knowledge we need to destroy it. Eleanor met his eyes. You said we have 3 weeks. I don't think we're going to find the answer in secondhand research. The grimoire is the source. I need to go to the source. She's right. Theron's voice was reluctant. I hate to say it, but she's right. We've been studying this from the outside for centuries and gotten nowhere. A key-bearer working from the inside with direct access to the binding itself, that could actually work. Kaelin's jaw tightened. It could also kill her. I'm already marked for death. Eleanor kept her voice steady. In 3 weeks, your father hands me over to be sacrificed unless we find another way. This is another way. Dangerous, yes. But we're out of safe options. Where is the grimoire now? Kaelin asked. His tone said he knew he'd lost this argument but wasn't happy about it. The archives where Eleanor worked, Theron said. After the attack, human authorities confiscated it as evidence. They won't understand what they have, of course. To them, it's just an old book that somehow injured someone. Then we need to get it back. Eleanor's mind was already working through logistics. I can go back to the archives. If I say I want to return to work, check on things, they'll let me in. Once you're there, you're exposed. Kaelin shook his head. The factions know where you worked. They'll be watching, waiting for you to leave protected ground. Then come with me. You're bound as my protector now, right? That includes leaving the castle. It includes me painting a target on both our backs. But he was considering it, she could tell. We'd need to move fast, in and out before anyone can organize an attack, and we'd need backup. I'll arrange it, Theron said. A small team, discreet. We can portal directly to the city, minimize exposure time. Portal? Eleanor looked between them. Magical transportation. Faster than driving, harder to track. Kaelin ran a hand through his hair. All right. We do this tonight. After sunset, when my people are strongest. Theron, I want Iris and Marcus with us. And bring Seraphine. If things go wrong, we'll need her shields. Yes, my lord. Eleanor. Kaelin turned to her. If we do this, you follow my lead. You don't engage with the grimoire until we're somewhere secure. And if I say we run, we run. Understood? Understood. He studied her for another moment, then nodded. Tonight, then. In the meantime, keep studying. Learn everything you can from that fragment. The more you understand before you face the grimoire itself, the better. Eleanor spent the rest of the day in the library. Theron was a patient teacher, guiding her through texts that explained the history of the pact, the nature of the old ones, the structure of magical bindings. She learned that the old ones weren't evil exactly. They were simply fundamentally incompatible with human existence. They were chaos and hunger and transformation, forces that had shaped the primordial world. Humanity represented order, stability, fixed forms. The two couldn't coexist. The war had lasted 300 years. By the end, humanity was losing. The old ones had learned to target human settlements, human minds, unraveling civilization from within. In desperation, the greatest mages of the age had created the grimoire, a binding spell given physical form, powered by willing sacrifice. One person would accept the mark, serve as the living anchor for the pact, and hold the barrier until their natural death. Then the grimoire would choose another. It had worked for a century. Then politics had gotten involved. Kings and councils, who wanted to control who became keybearer, who wanted to use the power for leverage. They'd started forcing the issue, killing keybearers before their time to reset the cycle when it suited them. The grimoire had adapted, but imperfectly. Each forced sacrifice weakened the binding a little more. No one's been a willing key-bearer in over 200 years, Theron explained, his voice heavy with old sorrow. The grimoire chooses, but by the time the mark manifests, the factions have already decided that person's fate. They never get the chance to truly fulfill the role. Until now, Eleanor said quietly. Until now. She touched the fragment again, letting the connection flow through her. This time she could sense more. The grimoire's frustration, its degradation, its desperate searching for someone who would work with it instead of against it. It wasn't malevolent. It was a tool designed for a specific purpose, and it had been misused for so long it was breaking down. I can feel it, she said. It wants to end. Not the pact itself. It's tired, damaged. If someone could help it complete its function properly, help it seal the old ones away permanently, it would dissolve. The binding would lock into place without needing a living anchor. Theron went very still. Are you certain? As certain as I can be without asking it directly. Eleanor pulled back, flexing her marked hand. That's what tonight is about. I need to have a conversation with the grimoire, really understand what it needs, what I can do. That's either brilliant or suicidal. A new voice, feminine and amused. Eleanor looked up to see a woman leaning against one of the bookcases. She was tall, with auburn hair and amber eyes that practically glowed, beautiful like all of them, but with a sharpness that suggested danger. Theron, you're corrupting the human with dangerous ideas. Seraphine. Theron sounded fond despite the exasperation in his tone. I thought you were preparing for tonight. I am prepared. I've been prepared for decades. Finally get to do something interesting instead of maintaining barrier spells around a castle full of brooding immortals. She pushed off the bookcase, moving closer to study Eleanor with unabashed curiosity. So you're the key-bearer who's got Kaelin in such a state. I've known him for 300 years, and I've never seen him this determined. You must be something special. I'm a librarian who touched the wrong book. That's what you think you are. What you actually are is considerably more interesting. Seraphine circled her slowly, and Eleanor fought the urge to turn, to keep her in sight. Predator instincts, she realized. Making prey nervous. You're not afraid of us. Why? Eleanor considered the question. I am afraid. But fear doesn't change anything. I can be terrified and useless, or I can be terrified and functional. The second option seems more likely to keep me alive. Seraphine laughed, bright and genuine. Oh, I like you. Kaelin chose well. She glanced at Theron. Does she know about the assassination attempts? What assassination attempts? Eleanor's voice sharpened. Theron shot Seraphine a look. We've been handling them. 3 so far since you arrived. Minor things. Poisoned food, a curse woven into the bedsheets, a shadow creature that got past the outer wards. Nothing that posed a serious threat. Nothing that posed a serious threat? Eleanor's heart was racing. Someone tried to curse my bedsheets, and I caught it. Seraphine waved dismissively. Removed it, tracked it back to the sender, had a very pointed conversation. They won't try again. The food thing was more concerning. Internal threat, someone in the kitchens. We're still investigating. This is insane. This is court politics. Theron's voice was apologetic. The king declared you under protection, but that doesn't stop the factions from testing it, from trying to eliminate you in ways that can't be traced back to them. We've been monitoring everything that comes near you. Eleanor sat down heavily. Does Kaelin know? He ordered the monitoring. Seraphine pulled out a chair and sat backward on it, arms crossed over the back. He's taking your protection very seriously, maybe too seriously. He hasn't slept since the binding. Just patrols the corridors, checks the wards, interrogates anyone who looks at your door funny. The bond in Eleanor's mind pulsed, and she focused on it. Now that Seraphine mentioned it, she could feel Kaelin's exhaustion underneath the determination, the fear he was keeping carefully controlled. "He's afraid," she said softly. "Of course he's afraid." Seraphine's amusement faded into something more serious. He failed to save Thomas. That guilt has shaped everything he's done for 4 centuries. Now he has another key-bearer, another chance, and he's terrified of failing again. For what it's worth, I don't think he will. He's stronger now, wiser, and he has support this time. People who agree with him instead of just following orders. Do you agree with him? I think the pact is an abomination that's outlived its purpose. I think sacrificing innocence to maintain it is morally reprehensible, and I think if there's any chance of ending it properly, we have to take it regardless of risk. Seraphine met her eyes. So yes, I'm with you. I'll protect you tonight, and I'll help you however I can. Not because Kaelin asked, though I'd do it for him anyway, but because it's the right thing to do. Eleanor felt something loosen in her chest. Allies. She had allies in this impossible situation. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Thank me if we all survive this. Seraphine stood. I should go finish preparations. Portals require precise calculations, especially when transporting multiple people. Theron, I'll need the exact coordinates of the archives. I'll send them within the hour. Seraphine left in a swirl of movement. Eleanor looked at Theron, who was watching her with that patient, kind expression. How long have you known Kaelin? Since he was human. I was his tutor when he was a boy. History, languages, philosophy. I watched him grow into a thoughtful, compassionate young man. And I watched what happened when he was turned. How he struggled with the power, the hunger, the way immortality changes you. Theron's voice was distant with memory. He's one of the good ones, Eleanor. He's spent centuries trying to be better than what he is. Don't let his father's cruelty taint your perception of him. His father turned him? Yes. During a plague, when Kaelin was dying. The king couldn't bear to lose his heir, so he made the choice for him. Kaelin has never quite forgiven him for taking away his choice, his humanity, his natural death. It's part of why he's so insistent about consent now, about protecting people's agency. Eleanor thought about that. About a young man dying of plague, waking up as something else, something he'd never chosen to become. About carrying that resentment for 400 years. No wonder he understands what the grimoire did to me. Yes. Theron began carefully putting away the research materials. He sees himself in you, I think. Sees a chance to give you the choice he never had. Night fell over Thornhaven like a curtain. Eleanor stood in the courtyard, dressed in dark, practical clothing that someone had provided. The mark on her palm was quiet, almost dormant, but she could feel it waiting, anticipating. She was going back to where this started, back to the grimoire that had marked her. Back to the source. Kaelin appeared from the shadows, and Eleanor's breath caught. He was dressed for combat, dark leather that allowed movement, boots made for running, weapons she could barely see but knew were there. His eyes caught the moonlight, reflecting it back like a cat's. He looked dangerous, predatory. Nothing like the careful, controlled prince she'd been dealing with. Ready? His voice was low. No, but let's do it anyway. He smiled slightly at that. The team is assembled. Iris, Marcus, and Seraphine. We'll portal directly to an alley behind the archives. From there, it's 100 yards to the service entrance. We move fast, get in, locate the grimoire, get out. Total time inside the building, 5 minutes maximum. What if we can't find it in 5 minutes? Then we leave and try again another night. I'm not risking you for a book. He paused. Even if that book is the key to everything. The others joined them. Iris with her calm efficiency, Marcus looking nervous but determined, and Seraphine practically crackling with contained energy. They gathered in a circle, and Seraphine began drawing symbols in the air with her fingers. They glowed golden, hanging like calligraphy against the darkness. "Everyone join hands," she instructed. Eleanor in the center. The portal might react strangely to the mark. "I'll need to compensate." Eleanor took Kaylin's hand on one side, Iris's on the other. The contact sent warmth through the bond, Kaylin's steady presence in her mind like an anchor. Seraphine completed the final symbol, spoke a word in a language that hurt to hear, and reality tore open. The portal was a wound in the world, shimmering, wrong, beautiful in a terrible way. Eleanor could see through it to the alley Kaylin had described, dark and empty and real. Seraphine stepped through first, then Marcus, then Iris. Kaylin squeezed Eleanor's hand once and they moved together. The transition was disorienting. One moment she was in Thornhaven's courtyard. The next she was stumbling into a wet alley that smelled like garbage and rain. The portal sealed behind them with a sound like rushing wind, and then they were alone in the human world. The difference was stark. No magic in the air, no weight of ancient power. Just the normal city at night. Traffic sounds, distant music, the glow of streetlights. It felt simultaneously more real and less substantial than Thornhaven. This way. Kaylin moved quickly, and they followed. The archives building loomed ahead, dark except for the security lights. Kaylin led them to the service entrance, where Marcus produced a key card. "How did you—" "I've been here before," Marcus said quietly, studying the archives under a false identity. It wasn't hard to make a copy. He swiped the card. The door unlocked with a soft click. They entered in silence. The archives were eerily quiet at night, emergency lighting casting everything in shades of gray. Eleanor led them through corridors she knew by heart, past empty offices and silent reading rooms, toward the secure storage where they would have taken the grimoire. "Wait." Seraphine held up a hand. "There's a ward. Recent. Someone's been here." Kaylin moved in front of Eleanor instinctively. "Can you break it?" "Yes, but it'll alert whoever said it that we're here. We'll have minutes at best." "Do it." Seraphine traced patterns in the air. The ward became visible for a moment. A web of red light strung across the corridor, then dissolved. An alarm sounded somewhere distant, barely audible. "Move," Kaylin ordered. They ran. Down one corridor, through a security door that Marcus opened with another copied card, into the climate-controlled vault where rare and dangerous items were stored. Eleanor's mark was burning now, pulling her toward something. She followed the sensation to a locked cage in the back corner. The grimoire sat on a metal shelf, looking exactly as it had when she'd first seen it. Innocent, beautiful, deadly. There. Eleanor reached toward the cage door. "Don't touch it yet." Seraphine was already working on the locks. Magical and mundane. Let me make sure there aren't any more surprises. Footsteps echoed from the corridor. Multiple sets moving fast. "We have company," Iris said calmly, drawing a blade that seemed to appear from nowhere. "I'll hold them off. Marcus, with me?" "We're supposed to stay together," Marcus started, "and we will, right after we make sure no one follows us through the portal." Iris was already moving toward the door. "My lord, get the book and get the key bearer out." "We'll be right behind you." Kaylin looked torn but nodded. 2 minutes. If you're not at the portal point in 2 minutes, we're coming back for you." Understood. Iris and Marcus disappeared into the corridor. Eleanor heard sounds of combat start immediately. Shouts, the clang of metal, something that might have been magic crackling through the air. Done. Seraphine threw open the cage door. "Eleanor, it's yours." Eleanor reached for the grimoire. Her marked palm touched the leather, and the connection slammed into her like a physical blow. The book opened eagerly, pages flipping on their own, symbols glowing, and Eleanor fell into it. Information poured through her, overwhelming, massive, the complete structure of the pact, every node and connection. The names of the old ones bound behind the barrier, their natures and hungers, the history of every keybearer, their lives and deaths written in blood and magic. And beneath it all, the grimoire's purpose, its desperate, degrading attempt to maintain a binding that was killing it. "Help," it seemed to whisper directly into her mind. Help us end this. Help us complete what was started. Help us rest, Eleanor. Kaylin's voice distant. We need to go. She couldn't move. Couldn't pull away. The grimoire had her, was showing her everything, and she needed to see it all, needed to understand. Hands closed on her shoulders, breaking the connection. Eleanor gasped, the real world slamming back into focus. Kaylin was holding her, the grimoire was in her arms, and Seraphine was opening a portal that looked wrong, unstable, hurried. They're coming, Seraphine said. Multiple hostiles, and I think some of them are ours. The factions moved fast. Iris and Marcus burst back into the vault. Iris was bleeding from a cut on her arm, and Marcus looked terrified, but unharmed. Go! Iris shouted. There are at least a dozen of them, and the wall exploded inward. Debris showered across the vault. Through the hole came figures in dark clothing, moving with inhuman speed. Eleanor caught glimpses of pale faces, gleaming eyes, weapons that looked both ancient and deadly. The factions. They'd come for her. Kaylin shoved her toward the portal. Seraphine, get her through, now. Not without. That's an order. His voice carried absolute authority. Protect the keybearer. That's all that matters. Seraphine grabbed Eleanor's arm and dragged her toward the portal. Eleanor fought, trying to reach back for Kaylin, but Seraphine was stronger. Don't make his sacrifice meaningless, she hissed. They fell through the portal together. The transition was worse this time, painful, disorienting, like being turned inside out. Eleanor hit the ground in Thornhaven's courtyard hard enough to knock the breath from her lungs. The grimoire tumbled from her arms, landing in the grass. Seraphine was already up, holding the portal open with visible effort. Come on, she muttered. Come on. Marcus came through, stumbling. Then Iris, supporting someone Eleanor didn't recognize, another vampire, wounded badly. But no Kaylin. Where is he? Eleanor demanded, fighting. Iris's face was grim. They sent a full assault team. He's holding them off so we could escape. Then we go back. We can't. Seraphine's voice was strained. I'm barely holding this open as it is. If I try to widen it, it'll collapse completely. Eleanor reached for the bond in her mind, found Kaylin's presence. He was still there, still alive, but she could feel his pain, his desperate exertion. He was fighting multiple opponents, spending power he didn't have to spare. And he was losing. No. Eleanor grabbed the grimoire, opened it. No, I won't let him die for me. The book responded to her desperation. Pages flipped wildly, symbols rearranging themselves into something new. Eleanor didn't know what she was doing, didn't understand the magic she was invoking. She only knew that Kaylin was dying, and she had to help him. The mark on her palm blazed with light so bright everyone had to look away. Power poured through Eleanor, pulled from the grimoire itself, channeled through the bond. She could see through Kaylin's eyes suddenly, see the enemies surrounding him, see his exhaustion, see the killing blow coming. Eleanor threw the power at him. The effect was instantaneous. Kaylin's eyes widened as strength flooded back into him. He moved faster than physics should allow, became a blur of lethal efficiency. Enemies fell. The assault team scattered, and Kaylin ran for the portal, bleeding but alive. He came through just as Seraphine's strength gave out. The portal collapsed behind him, sealing with a thundercrack of displaced air. He stumbled, caught himself, looked directly at Eleanor. What did you do? I don't know. Eleanor was shaking. The grimoire had gone quiet in her arms, its pages still. I felt you dying, and I couldn't. Kaylin crossed the distance between them in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms. The embrace was tight, almost desperate, and Eleanor realized he was shaking too. You channeled power through the bond, he said into her hair. Direct transfer from the grimoire to me. That shouldn't be possible. Keybearers have never been able to access the Pact's power actively. Well, apparently I can. Eleanor pulled back enough to look at him. Blood was drying on his face. His clothes were torn, but his wounds were already healing. Are you all right? I will be. His eyes were bright, intense. But that much power could have killed you. Don't ever do that again. You were dying. Better me than you. That's not how this works. Eleanor's voice was firmer than she felt. You said you wouldn't fail again. Well, neither will I. We protect each other, or what's the point? Something flickered across Kaylin's face. Surprise, wonder, something that might have been hope. Before he could respond, Theron came running across the courtyard with several guards. What happened? We felt the portal destabilize. He stopped when he saw the grimoire in Eleanor's arms. You got it. We got it. Eleanor looked down at the book. It looked innocent again, closed and quiet, but she could feel it now, a constant presence in her mind alongside Kaylin. It was part of her, and she was part of it. And I think I know what I need to do.